Many look back at ancient India as a pristine golden age, a time defined by the quiet ashrams of the Vedic sages, the tranquil architecture of the temples, and a search for philosophical enlightenment that seems entirely peaceful. But the historical record also preserves another reality. It describes ascetics covered in the ash of the dead, consuming human flesh, warriors in the northeast taking the heads of their enemies, and devotees in the south suspended in mid-air by iron hooks driven through the skin of their backs. At first glance, these acts appear to be little more than unhinged barbarism, the chaotic remnants of a world that didn't know any better. Yet the texts and traditions surrounding these rituals suggest they were practiced with a specific, intense intentionality. Each act was a tool, designed to force a shift in the human mind or to stabilize the order of a community. When we examine the reasons behind these extremes, the boundary between what we call civilized and what we call monstrous begins to blur. In the cremation grounds of northern India, the Aghori sadhus intentionally chose a life of total inversion. They lived where society feared to walk, surrounding themselves with the physical reality of death. Their practice is rooted in Advaita, or non-duality. If the divine exists in every particle of the universe, then logically, nothing can be impure. To an Aghori, the distinction between a fresh flower and a decaying corpse is a fiction created by the human ego. From birth, society builds folders in our minds for what is beautiful and what is hideous. The Aghori uses the most repulsive acts, like eating human flesh, as a form of psychological shock therapy. The goal is to break those mental folders forever, returning the mind to the state of a newborn who cannot yet distinguish between filth and a toy. Similarly, in the left-hand path of Tantra, practitioners consume meat and wine under strict ritual conditions. They aren't seeking pleasure, they are training the mind to remain neutral. By staying detached while the body experiences intense stimuli, they attempt to decouple their internal peace from external circumstances. By systematically confronting their deepest biological revulsions, these practitioners sought a liberation that ascetic meditation could never reach. While some used the extreme to change themselves, others used it to ensure the survival of their entire community. For the Konyak tribe of Nagaland, headhunting was a requirement for tribal existence. To be recognized as a man, a Konyak warrior had to bring back the head of an enemy. Only then was he granted the right to wear distinctive facial tattoos, inked into the skin using thorns and tree resin without any relief from the pain. This wasn't senseless violence, it was a cosmic transaction. The Konyak believed the human skull held a literal soul force. Bringing that force into their village was the price they paid to keep their soil fertile and their crops growing. In the south, the Garudan Thookkam ritual follows a different logic of sacrifice. Devotees are suspended from a height by iron hooks driven through their backs, reenacting a myth where the bird god Garuda offered his own blood to calm the goddess Kali. Here, the devotee isn't taking a life, but offering their own physical agony. They endure the hooks to prove that their devotion is more real than their pain. One ritual steals a life force to save the earth, the other offers up the self to appease a deity. In both worlds, human blood and physical suffering acted as a literal currency, a spiritual payment made to the universe in exchange for survival. On a larger scale, these rituals functioned as a way to manage the tensions of a rigid social hierarchy. They acted as a safety valve, allowing the pressure of inequality to escape before it led to explosion. In the Thayam ritual of Kerala, a member of the most oppressed caste becomes, for a few hours, a god. Powerful landlords, who normally hold absolute authority, must bow before him to ask for justice. By briefly turning the social pyramid upside down, the system allowed the marginalized to be heard, effectively preventing real rebellion. The most dramatic display of this social theater was the ancient Vedic Purusha Meda. A man would be purchased for a high price, given a year of total freedom, and finally bound to the king's altar as the fire was lit. But at the final moment, the ritual changed. A divine voice would command the king to stop. The man was released, and no one was killed. By bringing the subject to the very edge of death, and then showing mercy, the king demonstrated his absolute power over life and his even greater power to grant it. These ancient practices were not mindless. They were the load-bearing pillars that held their psychological and political worlds together. We believe we have left this barbarism behind, yet we sacrifice our privacy for digital validation and our mental health for corporate success. We give up pieces of our own humanity every day in exchange for the survival of our modern systems. 1,000 years from now, when historians look back at our choices, they may not see a peak of civilization. They may simply see another era of rituals